Hi folks, I'm the Bald Guy, and these are Bald Guy Basics. If you have ever considered buying a tractor for property maintenance, today's video is for you. This is my second tractor, and there are some things that the novice should know about buying a tractor, and I'm assuming you're in the used tractor market. If you look on Marketplace or any other social media site where people are selling tractors, you're going to see tractors that date back into the early 1940s. So we're talking about tractors that are pushing 80 years of age. The Ford Red Belly series of the late 1940s are still very serviceable tractors. So what's a person to do? What criteria should you consider when buying a tractor? I'm going to tell you some of the things that I look for in not only this one, but my first tractor. The first is price. Price is almost irrelevant. You're looking for a tractor that you can afford, so one that is in your price range. But there are tractors and there are tractors. My first tractor was a either 48 or 49 Ford Red Belly. It had the 12-volt conversion. It's a gasoline tractor. The first thing I think you should consider is gas or diesel. There is a lot of advantage to both. The major advantage that I noticed, having had one of each, is a gas tractor is much easier to crank in cold weather, at least in my experience. The diesel has more torque, more horsepower, especially horsepower at low RPMs, but I have more trouble cranking it in the winter, so you have to take that into consideration. Number two, the availability of parts. This is a 1999 TYM. It's a Korean-made tractor. It has a Kubota engine, and almost everyone watching this will know that Kubota, whether you like them or not, they have a tremendous reputation for quality. So it's a 26 horsepower engine. But here's the thing. The TYMs do not have readily available parts. There's no dealer in this area, and when I look online, there aren't dealers for a long distance here. I had to buy some parts recently, and I believe I got them out of Georgia. So take that into consideration. One of the amazing things about the Ford, the 8N series, even the 9Ns, the 2Ns, which are all 1940s tractors, then the I'm trying to find the other name for it, but the Jubilee series, including the Golden Jubilee of the early 50s, the Golden Jubilee's 1953, those tractors, in spite of being well over 70 years of age, have readily available parts. In fact, some of the parts are at your local Advance Auto or Napa type stores. So that's another thing to take into consideration. The other thing, do you want two-wheel or four-wheel drive? Typically speaking, a larger tractor can get more done with just two-wheel drive than a smaller tractor with two-wheel drive. So the smaller you're looking at in the physical size of a tractor, the more important four-wheel drive becomes. With my Red Belly, this was an 8N tractor, which means, I forget, but I think they had like 16 horsepower, or maybe 14, but you know, it's down in the teens, two-wheel drive, manual steering. It did not have a live lift, which means you've got to have your clutch out for the power takeoff and the lift arms to be able to function. This has all this stuff, all the more modern adaptations. However, I could do as much work in terms of pushing a scrape blade with snow and or gravel as I can do with this one. Why? The Ford was heavier. The Ford had larger wheels, a larger wheelbase. So those are things to consider. And when you start talking about larger tractors, where are you going to store it? So one of the things that happened to me with this tractor, and I know far less than any expert would, so I'm terribly naive at times, and I go to look at this tractor, and I remember saying to the guy, I said, look, is there anything wrong with the tractor? I said, has it been run off in a pond or something? Kind of laugh. I said, the last thing I want is to spend money and have to turn around and start working on the tractor. No, this is as good a tractor, I just need a bigger tractor. Okay. I get it home, and within a year, I'm having to do work. You know why? Because somebody ran it off in the pond. Think about who that might have been. So it's a really good idea if you're going to buy a used tractor and you are not um, that's not your strength. Talk to somebody. Talk to somebody at a. I've got a local mechanic friend. He's an automotive mechanic, but he also knows about equipment, and he can tell you things to look out for. And then look at the features you're looking for. If you're going to be, say, traveling between two pieces of property, meaning you're going to be on the road for some distance, do you need headlights? Do you need hazard lights, turn signals? Those are things to consider. What are the condition of your tires? If I gave you a close-up of these tires, there are obvious cracks. We call it dry rot. However, I've owned this tractor for about 4 years, and I've not had the single first instance of the tractor actually leaking. So don't let a little dry rot scare you off, because when you have tractors that are decades old, you're going to run into that. One of the things that I recommend is when you look around the inside of the wheel wells, this tractor is power steering. If you look on the inside, the back side of the wheel itself, where the hub is, you can see whether or not the seals are leaking. And if you see an oily film, it's not a deal killer, but be aware that, okay, your tractor already has some seal leakage. Those are other things to look at. Having a live lift is of great advantage, especially if you want a tractor for bush hogging. If you're going to run a rotary cutter, the live lift will allow you to push the clutch in and still raise the bush hog, for the bush hog to still be turning, being driven by the PTO. On an older Ford tractor, the 8N series primarily, the old red bellies, when you push the clutch in, the power takeoff stops turning, and you can no longer lift the lift arms on the back, which control your implement. So you can deal with it, but you learn the slick little tricks of, number one, you knock it out of gear real quick and let your clutch back out so that you still have power, and you can lift the thing up, and you have to be able to hold it with your brakes, of course, and then put it back in gear and move as you please. The other thing, if you do not have a live lift, your power takeoff comes out the back and it spins, you push the clutch in and it stops spinning. However, if you have, for example, a rotary cutter, a bush hog, and that bush hog has tremendous weight on the blade, so it's like a heavy flywheel. It's going to keep spinning. You push your clutch in, that tractor will keep going. Why? Because that cutter is turning the power takeoff, which is engaged with the gear system. And a number of people over the years, you know, they're bush hogging up next to the pond, and they go to the pond and push the clutch in, and the cutter keeps pushing them, and it pushes them right into the pond. There's a little thing called an overrun clutch, something like that. It clips over the power takeoff, and it's basically a ratchet. When the power takeoff turns in one direction, it works fine, and then when you stop the power takeoff, it spins like the ratchet on your socket, and you just hear click, 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 and it will save you a tremendous amount of danger on your tractor. If you're buying an older tractor, have them crank it. Go around to the back, make sure it's got an implement on it, something with some weight, and raise the implement up and let the tractor run at low RPMs. A tractor whose lift is in good condition, their hydraulic system is in good condition, will sit there and hold that implement perfectly. No shaking, no bumping. But a tractor with a weak system, you'll see it. I'm thinking of one I went to buy one time, and it was a red belly. And the guy had a blade on it, and the blade would go down about an inch or two and then jump back up and down about an inch or two. I'm like, I see your lift is a little bit weak. He's all, when you idle it up, that goes away. Well, maybe it does go away, but it tells you you're going to have trouble. Those can be fixed. They are rebuildable. But if you're not wanting to work on them, and I wasn't, it's a no-go. Condition of the rubber on the tires. I'm not talking about dry rot here. I'm talking about how much rubber is left on the cleats. One of the major costs to maintain and to replace on a tire, on a tractor, is the tires. You can spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars, depending on whether you have 1, 2, 3, 4. Brakes is another issue. Make sure that you know whether or not the gauges work. Particularly important is the hour gauge, because, you know, in our cars we go X number of miles. 3,500 miles is kind of the norm for a lot of cars before we change the oil. Not so on a tractor. On a tractor you go so many hours, and how will you know that if you don't have an hour meter? Here's the good news. You can easily put an aftermarket hour meter on that basically counts time when the switch is on and power's run to it. So those are things you can do, but you need to be aware of. Diesels, I like, with the exception, fuel is higher, and it's not terribly hard to get, but not every service station where I live has diesel, so you have to go to certain places. Diesels also require two-stage turnoff. You can be on a diesel tractor and turn the switch off, or at least on these, and the tractor continues to run. You have to pull down here at the bottom. There's a gas shut-off, a fuel shut-off, that you also have to pull. It's simple once you understand the system, but here is the drawback to it. On a number of occasions when I get in a little bit of a hurry, I reach down and you can turn the switch off or pull the fuel cut off first. It doesn't matter what order you do it. But I've reached down and cut the fuel off, the tractor cuts off, and I jump off to do something else, come back, and I see my gauges are still powered. So in other words, I've still got the switch on the tractor, which can run your battery down. So just learn how to use your equipment, learn the idiosyncrasies of the equipment. A small four-wheel drive tractor. I don't know the weight of a red belly. You might be able to Google that and look it up. But this little fella here, which is a 1999 TYM, this thing weighs right at 2,900 pounds. Not hard for me to haul it. It doesn't take a huge trailer to haul it. The wheelbase is short enough and it's narrow enough that I can put it in most places behind where the Camry is. We've got a back deck that's 1 story high, so I can pull it under the deck. I've got a shed down there that is literally, I can't stand up under the shed, but it is tall enough to slide the tractor under, especially if I take the roll bar down. So little things like that, storage makes a difference. Front bumper, a drawbar, a tongue on the back. All of these are not standard features. The drawbar isn't anyway, that's an add-on, but most tractors, everybody sold a tractor, they left the drawbar on it. And that's the piece between the 2 lift arms with holes where you can drop a pin, to hold a trailer or something. On the front of mine, I've got a bumper here that it had a flange, so I bolted a ball hitch on the flange, and the pieces of equipment I have around the house here, I can actually pull right up to them. I've got a trailer and a wood splitter, and I can move them without having to go back behind the tractor and connect a tongue underneath it. So little things like that make a tractor much more valuable. And finally, you need to know, why is it that you want the tractor? What use will you be putting it to? I'm not going to do it now, but if you walk around the house here, our driveway is all gravel. So I've got gravel here behind me, down the hill to the lawnmower shed, which you can see it down there behind me, but you probably can't see the driveway. And then the driveway goes up around the house, and we have a horseshoe driveway, so you can come in on our driveway and drive in front of the house and go out, 40 yards up the hill. And the land slopes downward. I wanted a tractor when we've got snow. I'm of the age where shoveling the sidewalk, that's easy, baby, I got you covered. But when I had to go out, before I had a 4-wheel drive truck and I was dealing with a car, the car could not be trusted to navigate up the hill in the snow, so we had to shovel the driveway. And I just got to where I was afraid I was going to have a heart attack. So when I got the option of buying a tractor, I wanted one big enough. So this guy's a little bit small in terms of physical length, but it's big enough for me to get on and off of without, too much being cramped. It has power steering, and it came with a blade. And it was just big enough not only for me to do the snow, but gravel on uneven land always has runoff issues. So at least once a year, I regrade all of the gravel here, and I bevel my driveway so that water runs off to the side, and I don't get as many heavy ruts washing out in the middle of my gravel, unless we happen to have one of those gully washers that you just can't control. So it meets my need. And the other thing, I handle a lot of firewood. So I wanted one big enough with the hitch to handle a carry-on. There are, I think it's 5 grades of hitches. Grade 0 is for your little backyard lawnmower tractors. Grade 1 is the most common hitch for, personal use tractors, on up through I don't know, about, it's either 27 or 30 horsepower, something like that. So Category 1 fits almost all the implements for what I consider small, light-duty tractors. When you start getting into Category 2, Category 3, Category 4, and I think there's a fifth category, you're talking bigger tractors. So for if you're into that kind of tractor, you're not needing my advice anyway. So for a small tractor, be aware of the width that it can handle in the back with the lift arms. You want to know if it's a Category 1 hitch or not. If it's a Category 0, you're dealing with a lawnmower. They can call it anything they want. It's a lawnmower. It's on that size. And most of the bigger equipment just won't fit on it, the standard size equipment. So be aware of your hitch size. Do you want to deal with diesel or you want to go with gas? Are you going with 4-wheel drive or 2-wheel drive? And other than that, just look to see your tractor is maintained. A good rule of thumb, if somebody is using a tractor every day, and that speaks volumes. If somebody tells you how great it is, and you're talking about a sucker, you're looking at one. The guy told me how great this tractor was. His dad liked it. His son, who was like 8 or 10 years old, liked it. But he just needed something else. And he had a couple other tractors up there, and I'm like, well, gee, I've run up on a good deal. And then I found out he had lied to me. I found out he had cheated me. And I had to spend another $1,500 plus or minus, I forget the exact amount, on making this tractor usable. Okay. About a year after that, I took my wife out for a Valentine's Day meal, and guess who walked in? The guy who sold me the tractor, who I only met that one time. And he looked at me, and he got that sick look on his face. Now, I'm 6'5", somewhere, depending on when you catch me, somewhere around 285. I've been up above 300 pounds. But, I'm not the smallest fellow around. And he comes in, and he's about this tall, and he looked at me. And a number of things ran through my mind about what I could do, what I'd like to do. But you know what I decided? I decided just to look at him and smile. Didn't say a word, didn't acknowledge that I knew him. And when somebody asked me later, well, why'd you do that? I said, the greatest tragedy in the world was when he sold me that tractor, he didn't just lie to me. His 8 or 9-year-old son was standing there looking at Daddy the liar, and that's an image he will never erase. So, when you deal with people, just be honest, because somebody's always watching. I'm the bald guy. These are bald guy basics. I'll probably do some more videos about using the tractor and some tricks in using the tractor. But I hope this gives you some advice about perhaps considering tractor. And here's my trading advice. Everybody has an asking price. If you read the good book says ask and ye shall receive. If you want a discount, you better ask for it. So don't be afraid when somebody says, I want X number of dollars for this. Say, well, I've got some dollars and this is how many I've got. I have found that unless somebody has a really hot item, and if it's a hot item, you better pay for it, because somebody else will, and you'll be going, I wish I had that. But when it's just a luxury, offer a cut rate and do some bargaining, because if you don't ask, you won't receive. And the old phrase a friend of mine told me, when you're dealing with a trade, number one, don't trade even, and number two, don't give boot. In other words, I may want his product, but he wants my money, so that gives me a bargaining ploy that I'm going to use. And again, I'm the bald guy, hoping you have a good day, and I hope this helps you out before you buy your next tractor.